Hi, it's Amy with the Hag Reads. I am going to talk about just one book today, and hopefully it won't take that long. I have hit a few under 10 minutes, a few in the middle range, 14, 15 minutes. A lot of my recent videos have been 20 minutes or under, so, mixed bag, but I just ramble on as long as I do, and for the few of you that watch, thank you. Today's book is 52 Loaves, One Man's Relentless Pursuit of Truth, Meaning, and the Perfect Crust by William Alexander. Now, this is the same guy who wrote, hold on, because his other book has one of those really long subtitles, just like this one. The $64 Tomato, How One Man Nearly Lost His Sanity, Spent a Fortune, and endured an existential crisis in the quest for the perfect garden. Now, I read this when it was originally published, and I don't know how long ago that was, but a long time. So it's probably been maybe 10 or 15 years since his last book. I thought the $64 Tomato was hilarious. Now, I did not, the blurb on this from Jacques Pepin says serious, irreverent, funny, and informative. He tried to be all of those things, and he was definitely informative. He made jokes in the book, and one or two times I like, haha. And he definitely tried to be irreverent. And sometimes he did present information that was serious in terms of bread baking. But this one was not as funny to me as his other book. And I felt like he was almost like he was trying too hard. He tries to come off as, he's applying the title of the book, 52 Loaves. So his goal was he became enamored of the idea of learning to bake bread. He went out to a restaurant and he had what he considered the perfect loaf of peasant bread, and the flavor was so good and the crust was just this perfect, and so he wanted to recreate that. And so he undertook this kind of journey of baking one loaf of bread a week for a whole year, thus 52 loaves. And as the novels, or as the book, this is a nonfiction book, by the way, in case you haven't guessed. As the book takes off, it's him and his wife out in the garden planting wheat, because not only does he want to bake the perfect loaf of bread, but ultimately he wants to harvest and mill his own bread for this perfect loaf of bread. That's a little extreme in my book, but sometimes you get an idea and you got to run with it. It's an interesting story, and I enjoyed the book, but it didn't engage me. I wasn't quite as entertained and amused by him as I was with the $64 Tomato. And that may just be because I'm older and I don't have the kind of patience for, he kind of comes off sometimes as insensitive to his family. And like he thinks that's endearing or charming in some way. And I don't at all find that endearing or charming. But outside of that, I found the book to be, it had a lot of stuff. I thought it was just going to be about his process, but it really had a lot of information about the history of bread making, the intricacies of it, his travels involved in making all these loaves, and a contest he entered at the New York State Fair, and his trip to France, and going to a monastery and helping them kind of reestablish a bread baking tradition, because apparently, at one time bread baking was a big business in the monastery, not in terms of maybe money coming in, but that used to be one of their functions, was they baked bread for themselves and probably as a charity thing for the local community. But most monasteries now do not bake bread. They buy their bread from bakers, or they buy commercially available bread. So it was an interesting process to watch him and his kind of desperate pursuit. And, about halfway through the book, he's apparently baking a loaf of bread that satisfies everyone but him. He's obsessed with, that crusty bread with the air pockets and that type of thing, which he finds out, partway through the book, you don't really get in a loaf of peasant bread. um, but as a nonfiction book on a niche subject, I found it, a little bit charming. It was informative. I was informed and entertained. And the reason I picked this up, I don't know if I saw it on somebody else's channel or how I actually came across this, but I am starting myself to want to learn how to make bread. And I started with the flatbread that I talked about. How many videos ago is it now? 2 videos. On the 16th, I talked about the vegetarian cookbooks and how we're switching over to a more vegetarian diet. And then I talked at the end a little bit about this flatbread that I have learned how to make. And then I made a pizza out of that flatbread that my son just loved. So that's the start of my kind of bread baking endeavor. But I wanted to learn how to make some different kinds of breads. I know how to do quick breads, banana bread, pumpkin bread, zucchini bread. I've made plenty of muffins and scones, and I've done some popovers in my time, although it's been many, many years for the muffins, popover, scone thing. But I have an adequate talent or experience in that area, but I have zero experience with yeast bread. I tried once a long time ago and I got something wrong with the yeast and it was a horrible failure, and I never tried again. But now I've reached, I'm 46. I work from home. I don't work as much as I used to. One, because work for what I can do isn't as largely available as it has been, but also just because I don't work outside the home presently. I am working on remedying that with a home-based business that I may or may not talk about in the future, but yeah, I'm trying to improve our income in ways that don't involve me having to schlep boxes in a shipping and receiving anymore. My body just, my health right now, it precludes that. I've probably dropped out of a heart attack in short order. But one of the things I do want to learn how to do is fresh baked bread. One, because it has far less added ingredients to it, and 2, because since we started having more artisan breads, my son works in a grocery store and he brings home the breads that they kind of make on property, and they're not making that from scratch because they get frozen dough and stuff and they just thaw it and bake it, but it's vastly improved over sliced packaged bread that you get in the grocery store. So since we started having more of that, I kind of mentioned it to my son that I wanted to start baking some bread. He's like, "You're gonna bake bread?" And so that was pretty much the nudge I needed. But I want to learn how to bake some sourdough bread. I don't know the process for pumpernickel, but I love pumpernickel bread, like love it, and I like rye bread as well. So hopefully coming up towards the end of the year, and certainly for 2018, there will be some bread baking going on. I don't know if I can video that because I don't have a tripod or anything. We're trying to improve our recording setup, like the equipment that's available for recording. And so I'm hoping that we'll have something where I can do like hands only in the kitchen, like maybe we can record what may be disasters for my bread baking. I don't know if anybody's interested in that. But I also want to be able to do some stuff for my mixed media that I like to be hands only. Because you don't need to see all of me in my... you can tell from this part of me that I am overweight and I am old, so you don't need to see the rest of the package here. You get the idea. I'm old and round, and I'm okay with that. Any changes I'm trying to make are purely for health reasons, not for aesthetic. um, I am lazy and I like to eat, and I'm a homebody and I like to read and do art projects and stuff like that, and knit, and all of those are kind of passive activities. So um, this is my mold, and I'll be working on getting healthier enough to lose weight as a result. Fantastic. I certainly do need to lose weight according to my doctor to avoid type 2 diabetes and to lessen my risk for future heart problems. And I am working on that. I've started walking more. Um, I can make it most of the way through the yoga video. I still struggle with that, especially after this last bout where I was so breathless and exhausted. But I'm working on it. But I read 52 Loaves because it was kind of the same journey. I don't plan on inflicting 52 horrible loaves of bread on anybody. But I do plan on baking more breads, and I love scones, so we'll probably have more scones coming up. I have a couple of savory recipes. The one I have that I want to make today or tomorrow is for some cinnamon scones, and those have buttermilk in them. And the recipe doesn't make very many, so I'm not just going to like switch to lots of bread products, because that's not actually what a vegetarian diet is about. But I do like bread, and we don't actually eat that much. But what we do eat, I'd like to be more whole grain, more handmade. I'm totally switching from, we never ate that many processed foods, but we've been relying on a few things as staples in our diet that I know are not doing us any benefit health-wise. And I want to incorporate a lot more fruits and vegetables into our diet, and move out meat and what little bit of processed foods we had and what little bit of unfortunate eating out that we did. And that would be in terms of like Panda Express, which is not terribly good for you, but it's not the worst thing you could eat. I do like Chipotle, and I feel like that's reasonably healthful. Not counting the sour cream and guacamole, but we can get a vegetarian version of that. We don't have to have meat in it. I always ask for a mix of both the beans, and I would, when you ask for it without meat, typically they'll put in more beans and rice for you than because of the meat is being left out altogether. But if you like this kind of niche writing, I would recommend 52 Loaves if you're a bread baker or you're thinking about maybe learning how to make bread, or you're a gardener. The $64 tomato I thought was hilarious. And I would own this book. Like, I would go back to it. I would maybe read it again, one or two times as part of my process of starting to learn to make bread. And just because there are a few recipes at the end that maybe when I have a little more skill, I might be interested in trying out. And the $64 tomato, I would definitely buy. So when I'm repurchasing for my library, I'll probably get both of these books. And that's the author is William Alexander. So it is, it has humor. It doesn't try to be preachy, but it does provide a lot of information about the history of bread, about, some fascinating details about bread and how yeast works and stuff that I didn't really know, but I knew, things you learn about, the process of fermentation in bread that you maybe have learned about way back in grade school or high school that you maybe haven't thought about in a long time. So it was interesting in that way. So if this kind of niche book for the gardening or the bread appeals to you, it is a good, funny look at kind of everyday activities. And most people don't bake their own bread anymore. So I'm looking forward to giving it a shot as this year rounds out. And next year, I hope to kick off with a lot more bread experimenting. I want to get a lab coat for my Mad Art Lab, but I think I also want to get one for my bread experimentation. Oh, excuse me. My evil bread lab as well. We'll see. My son shall live through this process, I promise. That is all I have for today. If you have watched to the end, thank you so much. Happy whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you are having a wonderful, I'm not even sure. Let's see. What is today? Tuesday. I hope you're having a wonderful Tuesday. And that's how out of the loop I am. You know, you're getting there. You're a little ways into the week. At least it's not Monday. I've never understood the hate of Mondays. Then you didn't do your weekend right. Because should be, you know, reasonably okay. You know, I know it's commonplace now to hate your job and to drag yourself up out of bed and shove yourself out the door to work, but for many years I enjoyed getting up and going to work. Even if I didn't necessarily like the job, I liked getting paid. And why make yourself miserable by groaning and whining about Mondays when you could just go through them and, you know, be happy? It'll confuse people, really. Bye!